President Lee Jae-myung began the first leg of his 10-day European tour in Brussels on Wednesday, holding talks with Belgian Prime Minister Bart De Wever. He is also meeting with top European Union leaders on the same day, as Seoul seeks to deepen cooperation with the bloc on a range of strategic issues. The U.S. and Iran have traded military strikes, with Tehran retaliating against American bases across the Middle East after U.S. attacks are linked to the downing of a military helicopter near the Strait of Hormuz. The 20th Busan content market has opened, bringing together global industry leaders to explore new opportunities and expand the international reach of Korean content. In Brussels, President Lee Jae-myung has kicked off his summit diplomacy with European leaders, including Belgium's Prime Minister. He's also set to meet EU leaders with a focus on the economy and security. Our Yoon Jung-min is traveling with the president and follows this report from Brussels.
In his first stop in Belgium, President Lee Jae-myung met with Belgian Prime Minister Bart De Wever as the two countries celebrate 125 years of diplomatic ties. An MOU was signed on expanding cooperation for small and medium-sized firms on the occasion of Wednesday's talks. Also discussed was cooperation on the economy and trade.
The leaders agreed to continue expanding cooperation centered on strategic industries by continuing corporate investments between the two countries in the fields of battery, materials, and energy.
Also on the agenda were peace on the Korean Peninsula, resuming a direct flight between the two countries, and bolstering cooperation on semiconductors through a prominent R&D organization IMEC, located in Belgium. There was a focus on culture and education exchanges as well, such as expanding Korean studies at Leuven University and Ghent University, with the signing of related documents. Later in the day, he will also meet with President of the European Council Antonio Costa and President of the European Commission Ursula von der Leyen, with a focus on security and defense, economy and trade, renewable energy, and cutting-edge technologies. With the 27-member European bloc being South Korea's third-largest trading partner, the leaders are expected to address regulation issues as well.
We plan to deliver our message that regulations recently pushed by the EU, such as tariff rate quotas and the carbon border adjustment mechanism, should not become a new trade barrier, despite the EU's efforts to raise its competitiveness and tackle climate change.
They will also discuss bolstering security cooperation and joint efforts to tackle transnational crimes such as drugs and terrorism. In 2024, the two sides adopted a security and defense partnership. The leaders are also expected to address regional security on the Korean Peninsula and the Middle East and reaffirm the importance of a norms-based international order, multilateralism, and a free trade order. President Lee says his first trip to Europe will be an opportunity to broaden the horizons of Korea's cooperation with the bloc in a time of overlapping global crises. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News, Brussels.
Staying in Brussels, President Lee Jae-myung has met members of the Korean community there and vowed to make a better Korea. During the meeting on Tuesday, he said the martial law declaration by his predecessor in 2024 and consequential changes may have concerned many overseas Koreans, but the country is recovering in a short period of time. He also promised to make Korea a country that overseas Koreans can take pride in. Amid rising oil prices and a weaker Korean won, the ruling party and the government today held a meeting to discuss policy measures on easing the burden on households. Our correspondent An Sung-jin has the details.
The government and ruling Democratic Party have agreed to deploy all available policy measures on stabilizing the currency and inflation. At a special committee meeting on responding to the economic impact of the Middle East situation on Wednesday, officials from key economic ministries, including the finance and trade ministries, monitor the impact of rising oil prices and a weaker won on consumer prices. Speaking to reporters afterward, senior lawmaker An Do-gol said authorities would take a comprehensive approach to stabilize the foreign exchange market. He stated that the government is considering extending a temporary exemption from the macroprudential stability levy, a move aimed at reducing dollar funding costs and boosting dollar liquidity in the market. The macroprudential stability levy requires financial institutions with foreign currency liabilities above a certain level to pay a fee. The government had introduced a 6-month exemption earlier in January. Officials also pledged to strengthen enforcement efforts against activities that could exacerbate exchange rate volatility, such as speculative trading. Meanwhile, to ease pressure on household budgets, the government is expected to announce emergency measures to lower some food import tariffs for the second half of the year. It also plans to increase imports of key agricultural and food products, including eggs, while closely monitoring items vulnerable to supply disruptions. Senior lawmaker An said that 70% of the supplementary budget in response to the Middle East situation had been executed as of the end of May, while high oil price relief funds had reached a 99% distribution rate. Special Committee Secretary Yu Dong-soo added that crude oil and naphtha supplies remain stable, with more than 85% of crude oil secured for June and July compared to last year, emphasizing that there are no concerns over shortages of critical raw materials. The government is also to review a proposal with relevant ministries to ease measures regarding oil supply, including a possible shift away from stricter vehicle use restrictions. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Now, Korea is eyeing Middle East building efforts as a source of new business opportunities for domestic firms. The government rolled out a range of support measures designed to help firms expand their footprint in the region. Kim Jun-ong has more.
The government has unveiled plans to provide proactive support for Korean businesses seeking to be part of reconstruction projects in the Middle East. Finance Minister Koo Yoon-chul discussed the measures during a meeting with economic ministers on external affairs on Wednesday, while reviewing the economic outcomes of recent summit diplomacy. Officials said strong exports and improving domestic demand have kept the economy on a path of recovery, creating room to pursue new growth opportunities abroad.
Our goal is to turn this recovery into lasting momentum by helping Korean companies expand into global markets and secure new sources of growth through stronger economic cooperation.
Countries in the Middle East were identified as key economic partners. Koo noted that the region has been central to Korea's overseas construction industry and remains important for energy and supply chain security. He said infrastructure investment in the region is expected to increase as countries turn to economic modernization and diversification in the aftermath of the war. That could open the door for more Korean companies to expand into Middle Eastern markets.
Infrastructure investment is expected to rise across the Middle East after the war. With the trust built through diplomacy and the strengths of Korean companies, there is significant potential for win-win cooperation.
The government said it will help Korean companies with opportunities in sectors ranging from energy and transportation to urban development and digital infrastructure across the Middle East. Support measures include $6 billion in financing for major infrastructure projects, as well as a new strategic fund dedicated to investment in the region. Officials also pledged stronger diplomatic backing, including high-level government engagement and closer cooperation with regional partners to help Korean firms secure more projects. Wednesday's meeting also assists progress on cooperation projects agreed during recent summits with key partner countries. Officials said they will continue tracking progress in areas such as agriculture, fisheries, and science and technology, while working to resolve challenges that may arise during implementation. Kim Jun-ong, Arirang News.
The first Korean tanker to clear the Strait of Hormuz since the Middle East conflict arrived at the port of Ulsan city today. Owned by Korean shipping company HMM, the universal winner reached the southeastern port at around 2:30 p.m. on Wednesday. The 300,000-ton vessel is transporting roughly 2 million barrels of crude oil. Now, according to HMM, unloading operations began after the tank was fully docked at 3:50 p.m. Its arrival here comes about 3 weeks after the vessel transited the strait on May 20th, with approval from Iranian authorities. It is so far the only one of 26 Korean vessels stranded within the waterway to have it made it out. A total of 21 crew members are on board, including 9 Koreans and 12 foreign nationals. Recent military strikes between the U.S. and Iran have severely escalated tensions across the Middle East. Concerns now arise that the ceasefire could be broken and peace talks could fall through. Our Kim Do-yeon reports.
Hostilities between the United States and Iran have escalated following a series of military strikes and counterstrikes near the Strait of Hormuz. The conflict intensified Tuesday when U.S. Central Command struck Iranian air defense systems, ground control stations, and radar sites. Washington termed the operation a proportional response to the downing of a U.S. Army Apache helicopter on Monday, which investigators believe collided with an Iranian drone. In retaliation, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps launched strikes targeting 21 American bases across the Middle East. While a U.S. official reported that most of the incoming projectiles were intercepted, Iranian state media broadcast a definitive warning from the IRGC.
The criminal U.S. military should be aware that, in the event of any further aggression against the Islamic Republic of Iran, more extensive and more severe strikes will be carried out against identified targets in the region.
Following the military exchanges, Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baghei stated that diplomatic efforts to end the war are being severely undermined. Speaking at a press conference, Baghei accused the United States and Israel of repeatedly violating ceasefires, including agreements in Lebanon. He stated that diplomacy cannot occur in a vacuum and that Tehran will deploy military means when required, maintaining what he described as a resolute harmony between defense and negotiations. The escalation has cast significant doubt on U.S. President Donald Trump's recent claims that an Israel-Iran peace deal was in its final stages. Trump had previously asserted that an agreement would lead to the immediate reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Chinese President Xi Jinping wrapped up a two-day state visit to North Korea, his first trip to Pyongyang since 2019. Now, the summit produced pledges to deepen cooperation, including military exchanges between the two sides. To reflect on the significance of it all, we have our foreign affairs correspondent Oh Soo-young in Syria today. Welcome back, Soo-young.
Hi, Tam. It's great to be here.
Thanks for joining us. So, Soo-young, after 2 days of meetings and events, let's recap the significance and the outcome of the summit.
Sure. So the most significant outcome that we saw, well, really the significance that we saw today was the reaffirmation of North Korea-China ties, with both sides using the summit to signal that their relationship remains a strategic priority. According to state media from both sides, President Xi Jinping and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un agreed to strengthen high-level exchanges and expand cooperation in areas including diplomacy, law enforcement, and military affairs. Experts say Beijing wanted to use the visit to reaffirm its influence in Pyongyang at a time when North Korea's ties with Russia have notably expanded.
I think the closer Russia-North Korea relationship is giving China a greater sense of urgency in terms of making sure that China remains the preeminent partner for North Korea rather than Russia. At the moment when North Korea feels like it's got two options rather than just one, China wants to do extra goodwill gesture to make sure that China remains the preferred #1 option, if not the only option.
And they say that the visit comes at a time when Beijing is trying to shape the regional order after Xi's summits with Presidents Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. Before he even landed in Pyongyang, Xi had already laid out the bigger message in Rodong-sinmun, closer strategic communication with North Korea, and a joint push for what Beijing calls a more multipolar world.
The image will be, and the supporting messaging out of Xinhua and other Chinese official and unofficial statements will be, China taking the lead, U.S. influence waning, a much more fairer and open world and a multilateral, not a bipolar or unipolar order. That's for everybody's benefit.
Then, Soo-young, what was North Korea hoping to gain from President Xi Jinping's visit?
Well, analysts say that for North Korea's part, it had more economic interests at hand. Since 2023, Pyongyang has expanded military cooperation with Moscow, providing weapons, ammunition, and troops linked to Russia's war efforts in Ukraine. But experts note that if the conflict eventually stabilizes or winds down, the economic benefits that North Korea receives from that relationship could diminish. That makes China increasingly important. China, of course, remains North Korea's largest trading partner and most capable of supporting its ventures in tourism, investment, as well as cross-border commerce.
North Korea's biggest concern is how to secure Chinese support once the Russia-Ukraine war eventually comes to an end. One example is the Wonsan Karma Resort project, which Kim Jong-un has personally prioritized. For that project to succeed, North Korea needs large numbers of Chinese tourists.
Now, one thing that drew attention was what was not mentioned, denuclearization. Soo-young, but military exchanges appeared in the summit outcome. How should we read this?
Yes, of course, that notable omission that you talked about from both the Chinese and North Korean readouts was any reference to denuclearization. Experts say that Beijing is not publicly endorsing North Korea's nuclear status, but at the same time, it's not challenging Pyongyang on the issue in the summit readouts.
My sense is there's not going to be a big breakthrough on denuclearization or transformation on Korean Peninsula issues. She is likely not to ask Kim Jong-un to engage with Lee Jae-myung because, Kim has made it clear it's an internal issue for North Korea, and this diplomacy will not be dictated by outsiders.
Instead, the statements focused on sovereignty, security and development interests, while also mentioning military exchanges. Now that has drawn attention in Seoul. The Unification Ministry said Tuesday that it was the first time it had identified a public reference to military sector exchanges in the North Korea-China summit context. Now, it remains unclear how far that cooperation could go, as neither Beijing nor Pyongyang has provided further details on that.
I imagine military cooperation between China and North Korea will, as with all military cooperation, start incrementally. Something about, for example, cooperation on joint ammunition and logistical support component parts, joint development, for example, as a way for China to pursue some degree of technology transfer to the North Korean side. And North Korean side would see that as a gesture of confidence, also an employment opportunity.
Now, Seoul's response has been cautious as officials avoid drawing broader conclusions from the summit, saying that it is too early to assess the implications of the military language or the absence of any reference to denuclearization. Seoul has continued to state that it hopes exchanges between Beijing and Pyongyang will contribute to peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula as well as Northeast Asia. But we really do have to see whether the summit remains largely a show of political solidarity or whether it leads into more concrete coordination.
I see. Soo-young, thank you for the coverage and thanks for coming in tonight.
Thanks for having me.
The legality of military orders is drawing fresh attention in Korea following the short-lived martial law declaration in December 2024. The Defense Ministry is now looking into legal measures that would allow service members to refuse or challenge unlawful commands. Cha Yoon-kyung has this report.
The Defense Ministry said on Wednesday that it's reviewing ways to allow military personnel to make objections to orders and refuse them in certain cases. Currently, military personnel legally have to obey official orders from superiors. But a possible change comes as part of efforts to prevent certain orders from being carried out that clearly raise questions of illegality, such as a recurrence of the martial law declaration in December 2024. The types of orders that could be refused are also being reviewed, including those that could violate constitutional law. The ministry is planning to set out detailed procedures in the presidential decree. Since the 2024 December 3rd martial law crisis, the ruling Democratic Party and the Defense Ministry have pushed for revisions to establish legal grounds for military members to refuse illegal orders. Following 10 lawmakers from the broader ruling bloc submitting a revision bill to guarantee such a right, the ministry also appealed to the National Assembly's Defense Committee in November last year to revise the specific article, Article 25, so that clearly illegal orders may be refused and that personnel aren't punished for doing so. However, opposition lawmakers argue that the provision could be abused and spoil the military chain of command. The ministry submitted a revised bill to the National Assembly's Defense Committee in February. It is said that the ministerial level of the revised proposal will be prepared in time for next month. Cha Yoon-kyung, Arirang News.
The main opposition People Power Party has elected Jeong Jeom-sig as its new floor leader. The three-term lawmaker pledged to rebuild the party, restore unity, and thus regain public trust. He also promised to move beyond factional divisions and lead through collective wisdom. This latest leadership change comes as a former floor leader Song Won-suk stepped down last week following the party's disappointing local election results. Asia's leading content marketplace has returned to Busan City, bringing together global industry leaders and some of the most anticipated Korean productions. The future of content is on display at this year's Busan Content Market. Our Jo Young-eun was there.
From newly unveiled Korean dramas recognized at the Cannes International Series Festival to AI-generated feature films, some of the year's most anticipated productions are on show in the southeastern coastal city of Busan. Among the most anticipated titles is Sacred Jewel, whose cast and creators, including actors An Bo-hyun, Soo-hyun, and Lee Sung-min, appear to meet the audience. The series was invited to the non-competitive section of the 9 Cannes series in April and drew attention again at the Busan Content Market ahead of its release.
It was exciting and truly an honor to share the film with international audiences. Presenting it in Busan again before its official release is especially meaningful, and I'm very grateful.
Content created with artificial intelligence is also taking center stage at this year's market. Genfluencer, directed by Hyun Hae-ri, has attracted attention as the first Cannes series selected feature-length film with roughly half of its footage generated using AI. Starring actress Bae Yoon-kyung, the film showcases the potential of AI in content creation and storytelling.
In the past, directors often had to give up certain scenes because of budget constraints. With generative AI, I was able to create the scenes I envisioned without those limitations. I believe Genfluencers will be an experiment unlike anything seen before.
Beyond screenings and showcases, the market is facilitating business opportunities across broadcasting, streaming, and creator media sectors. Marking its largest edition yet, BCM 2026 has brought over around 700 companies from 55 countries for international networking. One of the most closely watched developments is the first official participation of the China Pavilion, signaling the potential for broader cultural and content industry exchanges. Emerging markets such as Mongolia and Romania took part in the event, while broadcasters and media companies including Arirang TV also met with content producers and distributors.
The basic role of the market is to provide a preview of works that will be released later in the year. Many projects introduced here have become major hits. Looking ahead to our 30th anniversary, we hope to grow into a marketplace attracting participants from around 100 countries and some 10,000 buyers and sellers.
Running through Friday in Busan, BCM 2026 is celebrating 2 decades since its launch in 2007 and reaffirming its status as one of Asia's premier content trading platforms. Jo Young-eun, Arirang News, Busan.
Tomorrow, atmospheric instability will increase, triggering scattered showers across much of the country. Some of these showers could be accompanied by gusty winds and thunderstorms, so please take extra care. As for how much rainfall, central areas could see around 5 to 30 millimeters of rain, while the southern regions could see around 5 to 20 millimeters of rain. And inland and mountainous areas of Gangwon-do province could see up to 40 millimeters. Meanwhile, UV levels will be very high in most parts of the country, so even with the rain in the forecast, sunscreen will still be a must. Ozone levels will also be bad in parts of the central and southern regions. Tomorrow's Seoul will start the day at 16 degrees Celsius, Chuncheon at 14 degrees, Daegu at 16 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 26 degrees, while Daegu and Gyeongju will both top out at 28 degrees. Looking ahead, hot summer-like weather will return this weekend, with daytime highs approaching 30 degrees across the country. Now here's a look at the weather around the world.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. From all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.